Alright, so apparently I am a dummy. And I double clicked the start stream button, which turned it into an end stream button. So yeah, I'm a dummy. Um, that said, let's kind of look at this again. So, um, Aaron from Girls Talk Comics was asking me and a bunch of people how we edit, just to kind of get an idea for how we edit, which is usually why you would ask that kind of question. And mentioned that her co-host Jess just does not like working with more than two audio tracks, which is understandable to me. A lot of people don't, but I don't really see any difference working with like two or three or four or 12 audio tracks. So I figured I would stream the editing of this episode, so if nothing else, then I can give Aaron and Jess something to look at. And, why not? We will let other people see it as well. So, here we go. A couple things to keep in mind here. I do have some things already done because I thought I was streaming already. So, I will tell you what I already have done. And I do have the door open, so there might be some cat. I can't promise cat, but if a cat comes in the room, I will do my best to get the cat on camera. That being said, let's get going. Alright, so I use Traction. Technically, this is an out-of-date software now because they've switched everything to Waveform, but I think Waveform is silly and Traction still works, so I haven't switched over yet. Hasn't been that long since they did that. So, not a huge deal for me. One thing that I do have here is this little highlighted part right here is my intro, like, kind of sponsorship kind of noise. So what I've done is I go and record these right before they come out because I might have an episode sitting around for a week or two, or in this case, like months, which is bad, and I should not do that, but it's kind of how things went with this episode for very dumb reasons. That being said, what I end up doing is I'll record these right as I'm finishing up the episode because that's just something that can work out really well. In part by reviewfix.com, because even though Patrick Hickey didn't tell me I could do this, I'm doing it anyway because I'm talking to him for this episode, so it just makes perfect sense. Head on over to reviewfix.com, your one stop for music, game, film, comics, and pro wrestling news and reviews. Oh, wait, no, your other stop, because you can also go here.
I'm Stephen John Drew from the official GonnaGeek.com show, a weekly geek news podcast that is a part of the Gonna Geek Network. Just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
I also go and add the Gonna Geek intro thing right there rather late because honestly, I just don't think about it until later. And I have a template here. This camera's bugging me. There, I don't like having to sit so straight up. Get it right on my chin. I have a template set up so that I've got these tracks and I've got this background thing in here already. And welcome to Play Comics, where once again we are just ignoring the whole video game comic thing, and instead I'm talking to Patrick Hickey Jr. again about another one of his wonderful books. Patrick, how are you today?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you so much for having me again. I feel blessed to be in your presence once again.
Well, this is round 3 for you, if I can do my math correctly.
Wow. And you're not sick of me yet, which is great.
Oh, it'll take a while for me to get sick of you. I mean, even Carrington got like 6 episodes. Why do you think he hasn't been back?
Okay, so now I don't feel good. Why hasn't he been back?
Because I got sick of him. No, I don't know. It's just one of those things.
Okay, all right. I'm going to tell him. I got you.
Oh, I'm going to leave this in here, so he'll hear it anyway.
I'll isolate the clip and I'll just send it to him, and I'll have it like loop over, because I'm sick of him. because I'm sick of them. We'll put like a dubstep behind it, like some Korean pop.
I love how you say that like you don't think I'm actually going to do it. Okay, a couple things here. One, Carrington is one of my very good podcasting friends, one of my very good friends in general. So the fact that I'm talking to him about him like this is not a big deal, and he knows that. And I honestly would expect him to do the same thing to me. The other thing is I need to see if I can figure out how to have the plugins show up on here that I'm using, because I am realizing right now that you are not able to see the plugins windows. So you might just have to trust that I'm doing stuff. So see the mouse go to random places, it's because there's a plugin that you can't see. One thing that I'm a little bit worried about with this is OBS, which I'm using to do the streaming, is introducing a little bit of a hiss. And I know that sometimes my guests' audio gets a little hissy anyway, just because of what they're using. There we go, that's better for the camera. The guest audio gets a little bit hissy sometimes anyway, so I can't tell if Patrick has the hiss inherently on his track, or if excuse me, or if the hiss is coming from OBS. Honestly, having that hiss is one reason why I started doing this backing track, which is what's highlighted here. There is nothing in this backing track right now. Let's go ahead and change that. I'm going to get rid of that. So here for this backing track, we're going to back up a little bit. Cut that there so that I can just go to the spot. That's not really going to affect anything. And we are going to add a little bit of a backing track. So I use Break Tweaker for that. It is complete overkill in every single way possible, but it works, and I got it when Isotope was having a good sale, so I got it anyway. And that's what I've got. So let's see what we've got from Break Tweaker. Helps if I put the... Oh, come on, don't tell me that Cool. I love this. Every once in a while, the computer decides, or Traction decides, I'm not sure which way it is, that it is not going to recognize the keyboard and the drum pad that I have, which is just, it's a weird thing where I just have to remember to unplug them and plug them back in. But let's go ahead and close Traction so I can get it open back up. Excuse me. It's just a dumb little thing, and I don't feel like trying to fix it. But I guess we will get it fixed now. So go get these turned back on. Yay. Drum pad doesn't really matter, but I wanted to press the button anyway. The drum pad I just use so I can have a record button that's a big old button instead of having to hit the thing right. So let's see what we've got here. Give this an input. I'm using the MPK Mini Play. I really enjoy it. Not really a fan of... Okay, the cats are going to go eat now. I'm not really a fan of the noises in this one. We are talking about shooter games, at least nominally. So I want to try to find something that kind of evokes that feel. I really like that one. So arm this for recording. And I recorded just a little note hit. just because really all I need it to do is turn on. And now, because of the way I have this set up, I am able to have this. I have no idea what I'm trying to say right now. Because of the way I have this set up, I can go. So what I'll do is I will have this start completely down, have it start before this other music ends, and then have it kind of fade in with this little bit of a curve. I don't know why. There's no signs. I just kind of draw a curve that looks good. So what we end up with is something like this.
And welcome to Play Comics, where once again we are just ignoring the whole video game comic thing, and instead I'm talking to Patrick Hickey Jr. again about another one of his wonderful books. Patrick,
I need to stop that so you can actually hear me. That's too loud. That's definitely going to make it hard for people to be able to listen to the episode. So, one thing I do really like to do is that I like to leave this overall volume at 0. So technically, I could go change the volume here on. Excuse me. I could change the volume here of this little backing track, but I like to leave it on 0, and I will change it in the brake tweaker window, which you can't hear for stupid reasons. Brake tweaker has a gain knob in it, and I can adjust the volume there. And this way, I know that if I have to mess with the volume for any reason, I shouldn't have to, ever. If I accidentally move the volume on this track of how it's playing, I know that I just have to set it back to 0. So that is something that I really enjoy. Oh, excuse me. That's something that I find easier because once this backing track is set up, I shouldn't have to change it for anything. So, let's go ahead and turn that off because you don't need to hear the backing track while I edit. I tend to leave it on while I edit just because I enjoy hearing it that way, and that's going to be the final product. But it's not something that's really essential. And I started using the backing tracks like this because I had a guest who had audio that really needed to have some like hissing things and stuff covered up. And so the audio track was the easiest and I think kind of funnest way that I had there to cover up the fact that they had some really weird hissing things. Excuse me. They had some really weird hissing things and stuff going on with their audio. And I couldn't find a way to save it that was going to take like 12, 13 hours of work. So I put a backing track on it and it covered up that hissing and we were good to go. So I went that way. So let's get back up here. This is where I was before. I'm going to back it up a little bit just because then I can make sure that I don't miss anything. So as I'm doing this, I'm going and I'm mostly listening for awkward pauses, which you're going to hear a lot of in here, because I'm trying to do multiple things at once. I'm listening for things that we repeated. Patrick and I are both rather experienced podcasting people, so we both are used to just repeating something if we said it wrong, and leaving the space in there. So if I come up on something where he repeats himself, then I'm probably going to take it out. If I come up on something just like that, where I yawn, then first off, I'm going to be really annoyed at myself that I didn't give myself some space after the yawn, but I'm going to take that yawn out. So let's get
We'll put like a dubstep behind it, like some Korean pop.
I love how you say that like you don't think I'm actually going to do it.
No, I know you'll do it. If I know anything about you and your sense of humor, and the groups that you're in on Facebook, yeah, you'll definitely do it. So I'm not worried about that at all.
So we're not here to dump on our friend, though. We're here.
So here is a spot where I had like a little bit of a sniffle. It sounded like. You can see it in the waveform. Let me zoom in here. You can see it in the waveform right here that I'm circling with my mouse that you can't really see. So maybe you can't see it. I'm not sure. But it's something that's going to be easily taken out. So I'm just going to cut that out. And one of the tricks that I have, I'm sure other people have thought of this as well. I'm not going to say that I made it up, but nobody told me. It's just something I kind of picked up on my own. Is that when I cut something out like this, I will overlap the audio a little bit, and that keeps there from being a just like you're going to have a little bit of background noise anyway, just because we're in an environment. It happens. We're not in a complete vacuum, so there is a tiny bit of sound. And if the mic isn't picking that up, then it doesn't really matter. If the mic is picking it up, then you're going to have sound, and then silence, and then sound again. And even if it's just the tiniest little thing, that's just something that bothers me because it's such an easy fix. So I will go and I will overlap these a little bit.
So we're not here to dump on our friend.
I'm not worried about that at all.
So we're not here to dump on our friend, though. We're here to
because you have that versus like here where it's really hard to line these up exactly.
I'm not worried about that at all.
So we're not here to dump on our friend, though.
There's a tiny bit of silence there because there's a tiny bit of space. It's probably not anything that's noticeable, and with the backing track, it's certainly not going to be anything that's noticeable, but it's such an easy little fix that I will just go ahead and do this. And I've been doing this since I started using Traction. It's probably not something I would have started doing if I'd started with the backing track, but it's something that I'm doing now, and it's something that I've kept doing, mostly because if I ever decide that I want to do it without the backing track, oh man, excuse me. If I ever decide that I want to do this without the backing track, it's a habit that I'll still be in. And honestly, if I can go take the backing track out with like one press of a button and redoing the file, so not a big deal.
So we're not here to dump on our friend, though. We're here to talk about the minds behind shooter games, which a lot of people might.
So here's what. Okay, there's some cat screaming. I'm not sure if you heard that. That's just them playing. They're weird and loud. So here is a spot where Patrick and I kind of talked over each other. This is why you want to go and record people on their own tracks. Because if I was doing this all on a single track, then there's nothing I could have done about that. But because I have me on one track, Patrick on this other track, then let's make Patrick blue. Because I have Patrick on his own track, I can go and take him out. And I still have the mouse button held down, so you're still going to be able to hear him. But I want to be able to show you a pretty quick what a difference that makes.
We're not here to dump on our friend, though. We're here to talk about the minds behind shooter games, which a lot of.
So let's hear that again without Patrick.
Dump on our friend, though. We're here to talk about the minds behind shooter games, which a lot of people might find kind of weird because I just couldn't ever really get into shooters.
Same here. It's like
so there's a long pause. I'm gonna take that out, and I'm not gonna tell you about the overlap thing every time, but you know there it is again. You can see pretty easily.
Same here. It's like in the introduction of the book, I'm just like, this was probably the book that I didn't want to write. This was probably the book that I enjoyed writing the least in the beginning. But then something.
Sometimes pauses are good. Also, my wife just got home, so let's see what happens there. There's going to probably be some noise.
Least in the beginning. But then something totally strange happened. I had like 3 or 4 amazing developers that I've worked with in the past. One being Eric Holmes, who worked on Hulk Ultimate Destruction, which is an amazing comic book video game. He was like, "So you're working on a shooter book, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, have you spoken to Lee?" And I'm like Lee Perry, like designer on Gears of War. Have you spoken to Lee? And I'm like Lee Perry, like the level. And I'm like Lee Perry, like the level designer on Gears of War 1, 2, and 3. And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "No." He goes, "Do you want to talk to him?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So I'm like, "Oh my god, I just got Gears of War in the book." And then Jake Simpson, who's worked on Revolution X, he's worked on NBA.
There was a cut that you might have seen me make there and then not do anything with. Sometimes pauses are good in a conversation, kind of just to give things like a little bit of breath. And I feel like with that one, you can. The pause is kind of like a internal gears turning in Patrick. Like, yeah, I do want to talk to this guy. Why are you asking? So that's why I left that one in there.
He's worked on The Sims. He's like, "You're doing a shooter book. I gotta talk to you about Soldier of Fortune." And I'm like, that game was like the goriest like shooter I've ever played. I'm like, seriously? He's like, "Yeah." He goes, "Send me whatever you want and I'll answer it." And I'm like, so all of a sudden, I started getting names that I wasn't getting in my other books. So we have like Frank O'Connor, the guy that wrote the story for Halo 3. We have Tony Giovannini, sorry, who worked on Metroid Prime. We have Tony Giovannini, the guy that wrote the story for Halo 3. We have Tony Giovannini, sorry, who worked on. We have Tony Giovannini, sorry.
Okay, so here's one reason why I don't recommend Audacity to people. Let me make one thing real quick. Let me make one thing clear here really quick. I'm not giving anybody shit for using Audacity. I mean, if it works, it works. If it works for you, it works for you. The workflow goes fine. But the main reason that I don't recommend Audacity to people is that it is destructive editing, which means when you cut something out, it's gone. So I have to make this cut in the exact right spot if I'm in Audacity, or it just doesn't work. With Traction, with Reaper, with Audition, anything like that, you're using non-destructive editing. So anything that you do can be undone real quick. So let's say I made this cut in the wrong spot. I just took it out. I could go from this other end here, drag things back in, so everything still exists. Get the cursor out of the way. Everything still exists. Undo what I just did. No, I don't want to keep that. Alright.
For Halo 3. We have Tony Giovannini, sorry.
So what we can do here is, I'm going to take that there. Don't really have much room for an overlap here, so I'm just gonna have to deal with it. That's fine.
The guy that wrote the story for Halo 3. We have Tony Giovannini, sorry, who worked on Metroid Prime.
I know, so we're just gonna have to deal with it, but I can't. That was too big of a space.
We have Tony Giovannini, sorry.
So now that we have Patrick not messing the name up a little bit, there's no reason for him to say sorry, because nobody's gonna know what he's apologizing for. So here is why I don't mind really the number of tracks that I'm using. I have my spot that I'm gonna cut right here. I select up here the track of me, because even though it doesn't matter, it's not going to change anything in my silence, I'm still going to cut that. I'm going to select all of these. If I had a third and fourth and fifth track down here for people being on the podcast, I would select those as well every single time. And I'm going to cut out the same spots in every single track. Drag the same things over in every single track. That way, everything stays lined up. When you have people using, their own recording for stuff, then you're gonna get tracks get out of sync just because timing goes different. It's just kind of the nature of how that works. But oh man, excuse me. It's just the nature of how that works. But I've recorded all of these on my own computer, so, or at least for this episode. So keeping things lined up is not anything that I have to worry about.
We have Tony Giovannini, who worked on Metroid Prime. We've got Dylan Cuthbert.
I don't worry about a lot of ums, but I already have a cut here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that out as well.
Who worked on Metroid Prime. We've got Dylan Cuthbert, the creator of Star Fox. I mean, this book is so stacked. Rebecca Heinemann, who was the programmer on like 4 different versions of Wolfenstein 3D. Tony Barnes, who worked on Jungle Strike, who worked on Urban Strike, who worked on Desert Strike, who worked on Medal of Honor. I mean, every time I do a chat, every time I do a chapter in these books, I have to play the game, replay the game. And shooters are my least favorite genre. They're up there, like game. And shooters are my least favorite genre. They're up there, like strategy. Shooters are my least favorite genre. They're up there, like strategy games. Really not so much for me either. If I was like stuck on a desert island, I'd probably go with like NHL 94, Pokemon Red, and Fallout 3. But I like Fallout 3 like with a melee weapon. Like I actually own the sledgehammer, the super sledgehammer, because I like running around the wasteland with the sledgehammer and just like bopping people off the head, not so much like the sniper rifle and stuff. So I'm not really a shooter guy. But then something happened playing through all of these games. I was just like, damn, this genre is so much deeper than people give it credit for. So it's just like, I remember I always liked Gears of War, but I always thought it was like unforgivingly hard at times. And then talking to the level designer, he's like, use the cover system. He's like, cover, and he's just like, look around. He's like, the game is really pretty. He's like, take in the atmosphere, and I did. And I'm just like, if Gears of War was like an 8, I'm just like, if Gears of War was like an 8 to me before, it was like a 10 by the time I was done. Because I got to speak to the developer and find out the way that I should play it, you know? So just like speaking to all of these developers, I have an uncanny appreciation. I have an uncanny appreciation for the shooter genre now. And it being 39 games, it's the biggest book that I've done so far. So it was just like people were coming out of the woodwork, and so many developers were vouching for me. This just kind of like felt vouching for me. This just kind of like felt like the book, and so many developers were vouching for me. This just kind of like felt like the book where the stars really aligned, and it's always hard to get developers. It's super hard to get developers. But this was the one where it was just like, wow, everything really came together in such a beautiful way. So it's like, I'm super proud of this book. This is the biggest, baddest book that I've done so far.
Yeah, so we can see right here that I'm circling, there's a spot where I have a little bit of a noise. It's probably just a mouth click or something. Go ahead and take that out, especially because I have to take out this space anyway. And without even looking, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it on the screen, but I can see where Patrick had some similar stuff while I was talking. So, yes, you do want to listen to your audio. Like, I know some people who do this, and so I'm not going to say you never should, but I'm not a person who, for the most part, can visually edit with this. Like, these sound waves to me, they are a pretty rudimentary map. Hey, Nix. Oh, no, she's going to the bathroom. She's not coming in here. So, no tripod cat for now. Anyway, I'm not a person who can look at the waveforms and know what they are. But I can see them as a guide for what is going on. But I know that Patrick isn't saying anything right here, so I can pretty safely cut everything that he's doing up to there, and I know that there's not going to be anything going on. Hey, Thor. Come here. No, you're a good boy. I'm sorry, one of my cats came in. Told you it was going to happen, but he only came in far enough to get pets, and then left. And then started yelling at somebody else because they have the audacity to use the litter box. How dare they?
So it sounds like this is definitely not a book you could have written as the first or second in the series at all.
No. It's just because I mean, so like I have Taylor Kurosaki, who was the narrative director. I have Taylor Kurosaki, who was the narrative.
I know I said earlier I don't really worry about ums, which is true. But when you have the repeat words plus the might as well take it out. Make him sound like he knows what he's talking about.
I mean, so like I have Taylor Kurosaki, who was the narrative director.
I think that sounds unnaturally quick there. So I'm going to back that off a little bit.
It's just because I mean, so like I have Taylor Kurosaki, who was the narrative director for the last Call of Duty game, the Modern Warfare remake.
Take that there.
Call of Duty, the Modern Warfare remake. And when the first book came out, like, I don't think, like, I had a relationship with Activision before, and I've reviewed Call of Duty games before for Examiner, and I've written articles about them for NBC and stuff, but I don't think they would have given me somebody that high up the food chain to speak to. And I feel like telling them at that time that I had 2 books out and speak to, would have given me somebody that high up the food chain to speak to. And I feel like telling them at that time that I had 2 books out, a third on the way, and this was the 4th, I felt like it lent a lot to my credibility, and it definitely helped. So yeah, this is probably some of the sources that I got. Credibility, it definitely helps. So yeah, this is probably some of the sources that I got in this book. I definitely don't think I would have been able to get earlier. And I mean, it goes the same thing for, I mean, my 5th book earlier. And I mean, it goes.
Go ahead and take this out as well. I don't want to leave too many of them in. I think finding that nice little balance there. We know this isn't a scripted show. Nobody's expecting everything to go. Like, if you close your eyes, that's basically the script that I have for everything before we come into this. I've got some basic questions I want to make sure get answered, and most of the time the guests end up answering those questions before I can ask them, as evidenced by me giving people shit for answering the questions before I ask them.
I definitely don't think I would have been able to get earlier. And I mean, it goes the same thing for, I mean, my 5th book.
Alright, so here's a spot where the non-destructive editing is going to be really useful, because I took off too much.
To get earlier. And I mean, it goes the same thing.
Maybe I didn't. I just started listening too late.
This is probably some of the sources that I got in this book. I definitely don't think I would have been able to get earlier. And I mean, it goes the same thing for, I mean, my 5th book is the minds behind the Sega Genesis games that's coming out like at the end of this year. And then The sixth book is the minds behind the Sony PlayStation games, and that's going to be coming out like early 2022. Both of those books are finished already, and the sources for my fifth and sixth book are off the charts, insane too. So it just keeps getting better and better, you know. So just like I tell people this all the time, and I don't say it because I want them to buy all of my books, but there's definitely like a growing process. I'm super proud of like the first book, super proud of the second book, but it just keeps getting like the experience for me keeps getting better. I feel like the writing's getting better, the reporting's getting better, and I'm getting better sources.
And I'm having
it's like
faces made at me
I'm
from out
getting
the hallway.
like when somebody goes, "Oh, did you get this game?" I go, "Mm-hmm, yes, I did." You know, so it just feels a lot. It feels like I'm getting better, the reporting's getting better, and I'm getting better sources. They go, "Oh, did you get this game?" I go, "Mm-hmm." Somebody goes, "Oh, did you get this game? This game?" I go, "Mm-hmm, yes, I did." You know, it's like I'm getting like when somebody goes, "Oh, did you get this game?" I go, "Mm-hmm, yes, I did." You know, so it just feels a lot. It feels a lot better. This book.
So, now that I have the phone on silent, do you see yourself?
A lot. It feels a lot better.
So, now that I have the phone on silent, I don't need that happening again. Do you see yourself going back and redoing any of the earlier ones now that you've...
I've been so back and forth with outtakes lately. I really like having them at the end. I think that it is a nice little, like, behind the scenes look at funny things, but I haven't really had any. I haven't had too many of them lately. I guess I could say that. Because I feel like I've gotten better, and the guests that I've gotten have been good. So they haven't really caused any outtakes. And I mean, the outtakes are not a mean thing. They're just, here's something funny that happened. I know that in the. Wow, sorry about that. Like in the Becky Cloonan Michael Conrad episode, the outtake was my cat yelling at me that I could hear. So, I mean, I don't want to keep having the same me stumbling over words outtake. And I don't want to have it look like I'm making fun of the guest for anything. So, try to have the outtake be something that I did, unless it's something that they did that's really particularly funny. But, that like what I just cut out here could maybe be an outtake, but I don't feel like putting it. Excuse me. I don't feel like having it as an outtake.
Better.
Do you see yourself going back and redoing any of the earlier ones now that you've got this extra credibility?
It's funny that you said that. I don't.
Opening I will definitely take out. Oh, so let me back this up a little bit. I come in here, and when I was taking out Patrick, Patrick had a little bit of noise coming off of his end here. So I went ahead. I can visually take that out. Not a big deal. But I intentionally left some that I knew would be kind of cut out, which would be this part here. I know that I stopped talking like a second later, half a second later, something like that. But I wanted to leave something here as a reference so that when I go and cut this, there's also a tiny little blip where I had a mouth click that I can see. So I'm going to go ahead and take that out at the same time. You can see that I've got this little section here. This little section here that still exists. And I'm having it sit there so that as I'm sliding things back over, I have that as a reference point. Because we already listened, we know that this is an right here. So go ahead and cut that out. And I want to make sure that there is enough silence to do some cross-contamination with the audio here. That's a food phrase. I don't care. I want to make sure that that can happen.
this extra credibility.
It's funny that you said that. I don't see myself like going back and redoing anything. So I'll give you guys like a sneak peek. So right now I'm working on my seventh. So I'll give you guys like a sneak peek. So right now I'm working on my seventh book, PlayStation. So I'll give you guys like a sneak peek. So right now I'm working on my seventh book, the minds behind the Sony PlayStation 2 games. Haven't told anybody that, so it's exclusive to you. I've already got 38 developers signed up. But one of the developers that I'm speaking to worked on the original Spider-Man game on the PlayStation 2. So if you guys are familiar with my work, you know that I interviewed the programmer for the first book of that game. So it was a good chapter. I was proud of it. He talked about how he designed the web slinging function in the game, like how Spider-Man web slings. He programmed it, you know? So I ended up getting the lead designer for the game, and he's going to talk in the PlayStation 2 book, and he's going to kind of like add more to the story that Jamie couldn't in the first book. So maybe one day I do Minds Behind the Game's Greatest Hits, where I kind of go back and add more information. Who knows? But I just feel like I've created a brand for myself where, I mean, I'm gonna, by the end of this year, I will have written 7 books in like 5 years. And I mean, that's a lot. I mean, we're talking like 120,000 words a book. So we're talking like 800,000 words just on video game history. And there's definitely room to do more. I would definitely love room to do more. I would definitely love to do a compendium of some sort. And there's definitely room to do more. I would definitely love to do a compendium of some sort, or like a greatest hits where I just like pick my favorite chapters from each book, like a must own, like the book, you know. But I'm definitely not gonna stop doing them. I might stop how quickly I do them, because I've got a lot of other stuff going on right now with another son, with another child, and some things that we'll talk about later in the podcast, like some other career stuff. So and also you never want to like flood the market with your own stuff, you know. So just like I have people that'll go, oh, I'm gonna buy the 4th book, but I haven't finished the 2nd one yet, and I bought the 3rd already. So you know, you never want to put people in that situation. You want people to like kind of hunger for your stuff. And I thought a book a year wasn't that much, but it's just like I'm looking at some of the other people that do this, some of the other video game authors, and they're banging out like a book every 3 years. So it's like I don't have to work nearly as hard as I am, if that makes sense.
Oh, it definitely does. Maybe you should take some of that hardworkiness and give it to me, so I can get. Maybe you should take some of that hardworkiness and give it to me, so I can get some things written.
I'm telling you, 500 words a day. That's what I aim for at least. You know, every day by hook or crook, at least 500 words, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you do it, you will make magic happen. I'm telling you.
So,
okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop things here because, well, I guess maybe I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I won't stop things here. Let's go for a little bit.
Do you think you were? That was just horrible. What do you think? So, what do you think you were?
Wow, let's get all of that going. As I'm going, I want to make sure that I have both tracks selected so that I don't have something happen like just happened, because I want to be able to not have to figure out how to line up where everything goes.
I'm telling you.
So, what do you think you were? That was just horrible. What do you think you were able to bring to this book that somebody who is really...
I'm not even going to worry about outtakes in this one because I don't think they're going to happen. And if they are, they're not going to be me stumbling over words. And since we cut off me stumbling over words, we don't have to hear Patrick laughing at the fact that I stumbled over words.
I'm telling you.
What do you think you were able to bring to this book that somebody who is really into playing shooters couldn't?
just from experience, I know that this little bit right here that I'm circling is some kind of mouth noise. So I'm going to go ahead and take that out. See, I unselected my own track. So keep those lined up. Is really into playing shooters couldn't.
I feel like if I was super into shooters, I might be a little bit more fanboyish. I try not to be more fanboyish. I try not to be I try not to play favorites with any of these games. I try and let like Eddie a little bit more fanboyish. I try not to play favorites with any of these games. I try and let the developers be the ones that like add the emotion. I use my words to create context, talk about the impact the game had on the industry, how many copies it sold. Like I do all the research. And I feel like that has to be not dry, but that has to be as like straight and factually solid as possible, because if it isn't, and if it's just like, oh, I love this game, blah blah blah, and it's like, if I'm telling you that I love this game, why do you even care what the developer has to say? You know? So I feel like if you just come across and you're just like, Gears of War sold, 5 million units. Its Metacritic score is this. It impacted the shooter genre because it focused on evading enemies rather than just shooting them. It's multiplayer, blah blah blah. So it's just like, by me setting the scene and telling the reader like the background information that they need, it makes the quotes from the developer mean more. So the less attached I am to the game, usually the better the chapter, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, you're not going in there.
I think I'm going to take out where he says that making sense, because I don't know. Let's see how that sounds.
To the game, usually the better the chapter.
Oh yeah, you're not going in there with the agenda or anything, or the bias.
Mm-hmm.
So makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. So it's like I've written chapters on like the NHL games, and I just love hockey games, and it's like you can tell, and that's not to say those chapters are terrible. I don't think they are, but I feel like some of the best chapters I've ever written, like games like Night Trap, that I had like no attachment to, people read that and they're like, I love that game so much now, like thank you so much. And I'm just like, I didn't do anything. You fell in love with the game because the developers like really loved working on that game. That's what, and that's the thing. Like as a journalist, you want to be as selfless as possible and give the people that you're quoting, people that you're interviewing, the room that they need to express themselves freely. If you do that, then you can create a solid like piece of writing. So that's what a lot of game writers don't understand. That they think it's all about like their opinion. It's like every time I post a game on Instagram, I'll have some like wannabe reviewer or critic or somebody that actually does review games. They're like, oh, I reviewed that game last week, it's trash. And I'm like, you see what you just did? You just killed the conversation before we last week, it's trash. And I'm like, you see what you just did? See what you just did? You just killed the conversation before we were even able to have lunch. That's fine, but then last week it's trash. And I'm like, you see what you just did? You just killed the conversation before we were even able to have one. If you think the game is trash, that's fine, but that's not what I do. If the game is bad, that doesn't affect me being able to tell the game story. That's not what I care about. I care about like what the developer had to do to make said trash. Because what you might find out is this person may have like lost a loved one in the middle of the development cycle, or something might have happened to them, or the publisher didn't pay them, so they stopped developing like a part of the game that would have made it awesome. Like all of that information to me is just as important as you saying the game is trash. Some people understand it, and those are the people that love my books, and then some people don't understand that, and then they can't fathom spending $40 on a book that isn't about the opinion of the games. So it's interesting. Games. So it's interesting.
Something I normally don't do is highlight sections here to cut out. Mostly because in Traction I can go here at these little arrows and drag things, so I don't have to worry about that. Hey, Thor, are you going to come visit now? Yeah, Thor's still too far away. He's a butt-face today.
The opinion of the games. You know? It's interesting.
I mean, I can't fathom spending $40 on a book that's just, I love this game so much for 128 pages.
But, I mean, tons of people write books like that, and tons of people buy them too. But I don't think I don't have anything against those things. It's just that's not my style. That's not my bag. That's not what I do. You know. So
it's like a $5
for the people
book.
that want to read that stuff, yeah, absolutely. You know, because at the end of the day, I mean, I have over 3,000 games.
All right, so this is going to be an awkward spot, but this is where I'm going to stop doing it because I have been told that it is time for lunch, which should have happened already. But basically, that is how I edit. I will go through, I listen to the whole thing, front to back, cut things out as I go, and I will probably start another stream when I come back.